Oh, hey. Thanks for coming. This is the second book I'll be reading. The first one was Mary Trump's Too Much and Never Enough. I read it because it was timely, but my selection for this reading is actually one of my favorite books ever. It was the number one best-selling book in the history of Princeton University Press, normally an academic press. And as we all know, they certainly could use the money. Anyway, the book is called On Bullshit. It's written by Professor Emeritus Frankfurt. And I'm going to be reading it in sections. It's a very short book, 67 pages, but it's a little bit denser. And so from time to time, I'm going to stop during the reading of this book to maybe help make certain things clear that may not be obvious. But I would urge all of you to get a copy, own it, and read it. This is one that I have reread periodically in the 15 years since it was published in 2005. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy it. One of the most salient features of our culture is that there is so much bullshit. Everyone knows this. Each of us contributes his share, but we tend to take the situation for granted. Most people are rather confident of their ability to recognize bullshit and to avoid being taken in by it. So the phenomenon has not aroused much deliberate concern nor attracted much sustained inquiry. In consequence, we have no clear understanding of what bullshit is, why there is so much of it, or what function it serves. And we lack a conscientiously developed appreciation of what it means to us. In other words, we have no theory. I propose to begin the development of a theoretical understanding of bullshit, mainly by providing some tentative and exploratory philosophical analysis. I shall not consider the rhetorical uses and misuses of bullshit. My aim is simply to give a rough account of what bullshit is and how it differs from what it is not, or, putting it somewhat differently, to articulate more or less sketchily the structure of its concept. Any suggestion about what conditions are logically both necessary and sufficient for the constitution of bullshit is bound to be somewhat arbitrary. For one thing, the expression bullshit is often employed quite loosely, simply as a generic term of abuse with no very specific literal meaning. For another, the phenomenon itself is so vast and amorphous that no crisp and perspicuous analysis of its concept can avoid being Procrustean. All right, I'm going to tell you what Procrustean means because I had to look it up. The definition is marked by arbitrary, often ruthless disregard of individual differences or special circumstances. We go on. Nonetheless, it should be possible to say something helpful, even though it is not likely to be decisive. Even the most basic and preliminary questions about bullshit remain, after all, not only unanswered, but unasked. This is an important point. He's not trying to say everything there is to say about bullshit. He's just saying we're going to get a basic understanding. So understand it in that rather generous light. So far as I am aware, very little work has been done on this subject. I have not undertaken a survey of the literature, partly because I do not know how to go about it. To be sure, there's one quite obvious place to look, the Oxford English Dictionary. The OED has an entry for bullshit in the supplementary volumes, and it also has entries for various pertinent uses of the word bull and for some related terms. I'm going to stop here a second. And I want you to understand, the Oxford English Dictionary is the definitive dictionary for the English language. I actually own a copy of the Oxford English Dictionary, but what I own is the compact edition. This is one of the 2 volumes of the compact edition. And this is what it's like inside. When I bought this as a young man, I could read this, which was fortunate because the edition that I bought didn't come with the magnifying glass that's supposed to be standard. I can't really read it anymore. But I was able to confirm for Harry that in my copy of it, there is no entry for bullshit. And not even in the supplemental edition is there an entry. By the way, I'll be getting rid of that set of books too. We move on. I shall consider some of these entries in due course. I have not consulted dictionaries in languages other than English, because I do not know the words for bullshit or bull in any other language. Another worthwhile source is the title essay in The Prevalence of Humbug by Max Black. I'm uncertain just how close in meaning the word humbug is to the word bullshit. Of course, the words are not freely and fully interchangeable. It's clear that they are used differently. But the difference appears on the whole to have more to do with considerations of gentility and certain other rhetorical parameters than with the strictly literal modes of significance that concern me most. It is more polite as well as less intense to say humbug than to say bullshit. For the sake of this discussion, I shall assume that there is no other important difference between the two. Black suggests a number of synonyms for humbug, including the following: balderdash, claptrap, hokum, drivel, bunkum, imposture, and quackery. This list of quaint equivalents is not very helpful. But Black also confronts the problem of establishing the nature of humbug more directly, and he offers the following formal definition: humbug, deceptive misrepresentation short of lying, especially by pretentious word or deed of somebody's own thoughts, feelings, or attitudes. A very similar formulation might plausibly be offered as enunciating the essential characteristics of bullshit. As a preliminary to developing an independent account of those characteristics, I will comment on the various elements of Black's definition. And we're going to spend some time on this. Deceptive misrepresentation. This may sound pleonastic. Okay. I had to look that word up also. I'm going to assume you all are roughly as smart as I am. So pleonasm, the use of more words than are necessary to express an idea. Redundancy. Okay, so if you're with me. Deceptive misrepresentation. This may sound pleonastic. No doubt what Black has in mind is that humbug is necessarily designed or intended to deceive, that its misrepresentation is not merely inadvertent. In other words, it's a deliberate misrepresentation. Now if, as a matter of conceptual necessity, an intention to deceive is an invariable feature of humbug, then the property of being humbug depends at least in part upon the perpetrator's state of mind. It cannot be identical, accordingly, with any properties, either inherent or relational, belonging just to the utterance by which the humbug is perpetrated. In this respect, the property of being humbug is similar to that of being a lie, which is identical neither with the falsity nor with any of the other properties of the statement the liar makes, but which requires that the liar make his statement in a certain state of mind, namely, an intention to deceive. So to summarize, the intention to deceive is integral to the concept of humbug. It's a further question whether there are any features essential to humbug or to lying that are not dependent upon the intentions and beliefs of the persons responsible for the humbug or the lie, or whether it is, on the contrary, possible for any utterance whatsoever to be, given that the speaker is in a certain state of mind, a vehicle of humbug or of a lie. In some accounts of lying, there is no lie unless a false statement is made. In others, a person may be lying even if the statement he makes is true, as long as he himself believes that the statement is false and intends by making it to deceive. What about humbug and bullshit? May any utterance at all qualify as humbug or bullshit, given that, so to speak, the utterer's heart is in the right place? Or must the utterance have certain characteristics of its own as well? Then the phrase short of lying. It must be part of the point of saying that humbug is short of lying, that while it has some of the distinguishing characteristics of lies, there are others that it lacks. But this cannot be the whole point. After all, every use of language, without exception, has some, but not all, of the characteristic features of lies, if no other than at least the feature simply of being a use of language. Yet it would surely be incorrect to describe every use of language as short of lying. Black's phrase evokes the notion of some sort of continuum on which lying occupies a certain segment, while humbug is located exclusively at earlier points. So humbug stops short of lying, but is on a continuum. What continuum could this be along which one encounters humbug only before one encounters lying? Both lying and humbug are modes of misrepresentation. It's not at first glance apparent, however, just how the difference between these varieties of misrepresentation might be construed as a difference in degree. And then he addresses the phrase, especially by pretentious word or deed. There are 2 points to notice here. First, Black identifies humbug not only as a category of speech, but as a category of action as well. It may be accomplished either by words or deed. Second, his use of the qualifier especially indicates that Black does not regard pretentiousness as an essential or wholly indispensable characteristic of humbug. Undoubtedly, much humbug is pretentious. So far as concerns bullshit, moreover, pretentious bullshit is close to being a stock phrase. But I am inclined to think that when bullshit is pretentious, this happens because pretentiousness is its motive rather than a constitutive element of its essence. The fact that a person is behaving pretentiously is not, it seems to me, part of what is required to make his utterance an instance of bullshit. It is often, to be sure, what accounts for his making that utterance. However, it must not be assumed that bullshit always and necessarily has pretentiousness as its motive. Okay, we're going to stop there. That takes us up to page 13, and I'll record another segment shortly. Thanks for tuning in.